So the reason I decided to change this book is because I think it really is the ideal book for the three of us in terms of the themes that it discusses and so on. What's really interesting is there's actually two books. I found my book of choice through another book. I was listening to a series of science fiction writing lectures, fantasy science fiction. And basically, this guy uses examples of other books to kind of teach narrative style and, the bare essentials, world building, and how to use certain language, tenses, and viewpoints, etc. And it was actually on this episode of talking about viewpoints and tenses that he uses this book, because he was explaining that if you really know how to use these devices, then you can manipulate them to your advantage to make your story more exciting or more original. And he uses the example of this particular book, which, like I said, is not my book of choice, but you'll see how this all comes together. And this book is The Speed of Dark by Elizabeth Moon. And it's about a lost generation. It's about a generation that live in a society where they have just discovered how to get rid of or get rid of defects and mental illness in this society. But the catch is, you can only receive this treatment as at birth if you're a child. So obviously this is written in a time where the new generation have become adults, but the older generation still exists. So you can only imagine all of the exciting stuff that would entail. But this is the reason why I said I have to tell you guys about this, because the protagonist is part of the older generation, and he's autistic. And what's really fascinating for me is the fact that it's kind of tied into the narrative style. When the story focuses on the autistic protagonist, the narrative style shifts to the present tense. But when it talks about the other characters, it goes back into the past. And you can understand why that sounds so exciting. So immediately I went to investigate this book, because I was like, I have to tell you guys about it, especially Zara, because your study of the autism spectrum and things like that. I thought maybe this would be fascinating. And on looking at all of that, I discovered that everywhere I was investigating this book, another book was being referenced or used as a comparison. And this book was Flowers for Algernon by Daniel Keyes, which is a classic book written in the 50s. Like I said, discussing the same themes but in a different way. And the majority of the places that I was investigating this book, Speed of Dark, they were saying that either Speed of Dark is inferior to Flowers for Algernon, while the others say they're both good in their own right, but Flowers for Algernon is still better, or read it first before you read Speed of Dark. So like Speed of Dark was receiving a lot of mixed receptions. Flowers for Algernon received on Goodreads, it received shockingly positive reviews. Which is something that really excites me, because I don't know if you use Goodreads often, but like you rarely have a book that's kind of like 4 to 5 stars, like 99% of people who read it. So this is something that I was like, there must be something special about this book. I won't tell you much about it, but basically it's written as a journal. It's written as a journal of a patient, again in a kind of near future society, where they've discovered how to augment your brain so you don't suffer any mental illnesses. So I'm not sure if it's in the same way as the other book where it kind of is like, oh, all defects. I think this is more on a psychological level. And anyway, he's told to record everything he is feeling during this process. So that's something that, to me, I think will really be fascinating to read. So that's all I'm going to say about that book, really. I don't know if I already mentioned this, but it was originally a short story that developed into a novel. So when buying it, buy the novel version. And there's a lot of themes that are very deep in that story. And I've heard that it can get really intense at times, but it's worth it. Everybody says it's worth it. So yeah, I look forward to unpacking it together.